Hi everybody, this is Professor West again. Welcome back to C# programming. This is the second in a series of C# videos that I'm making for my students and for anybody else that wants to learn how to program in C#. And we're just going to pick up right where we left off with the last program. Last time we did an output statement that outputted hello world, how are you? And then we used these commands here to force the window to stay open. This week this segment we're going to be talking about variables. So let's get started. Let me go ahead and remove this line of code, and I invite you to do the same if you're following along. And what is a variable? A variable gives us the ability to allow for changes in a program. So remember in grade school when you would say, x plus 2 equals 5, and then you would try to figure out, oh, well, what's x? If x plus 2 equals 5, x must be 3, right? And then in the very next question, it would say x plus 1 equals 7. Well, when you figure it up, now x is 6. Same exact thing that we're doing here in this program. So, only instead of having to figure out what x is, a lot of times we're just going to simply tell it, but it can change throughout the program, is the whole point. So, let's think of a practical use. Imagine you are shopping and you're at Walmart, and they scan your item and it adds $4.99 to the total. Well, now your total is a variable, and it has $4.99 as the value. And then they scan another item and it's another $4.99. Well, now your total variable is almost $10. It's $9.98, but it keeps changing every time they add another item. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing here, is that sort of thing. There's several different types of variables, as you probably noticed if you've been reading your books. So the first one is called integers. An integer is a whole number, like 5 or 7 or 93 or 1,062. It just doesn't have any decimal places. So 1.4 would not be a whole number, whereas 1 or 2 or 3 would be. So I'm going to create a couple of variables, and I'm going to call them int. Let's call it num1 and semicolon. And let's do int num2 semicolon. Now I've created two different variables here. This one's called num1, and the way I did it tells it that it's going to have to adhere to the integer rules, which means it's going to have to be a whole number. So the system now knows to treat it as a whole number. Other types of variables, I could do a float. Float, let's call it, I like to put an F in front of my variable names that are floats. So F number 5, why not? Now, a float can have any type of decimal places that I want. So it could be 1.1, it could be 1.003, it could be 9.24, whatever. And let's see, there's another type that has decimal places called a double we could be using. And there's a whole lot of different types. There's like 15 different variable types, so you'll need to look in your book or look it up online or whatever. I'm not going to get into all that in here because I'm trying to keep these under 15 minutes, and that would way extend it. So another common one that we use is called a char, which is a single character, like the letter A or the number 5 could be a char. It's just short for character. And then a string would be like a word, or a couple of words or something. So we'll get to using those later, so don't worry. But for now, I'm just going to use a couple of integers. And one thing that you always want to do whenever you first declare your variables, is you want to give it a value. Now I could say num1 equals 0 to start, and then that way, if I forget to give it a value at some point, it's going to be a 0. Occasionally, programs will try to figure out a value if you don't do this. And I've actually had one time that come up with somehow like a 1,200 or something. It was weird. I don't know where it came up with that, but if you don't tell it, you never know. So it's always good to be specific. Now, you don't have to do it afterwards. You could come in here where I created it. I could simply say equals 0. And that's actually how I typically do it when I'm creating them and initializing them. Giving it an initial value is called initializing. And I could set it to anything. Maybe I want this one to start off as 10 instead of 1, or 20, or 5 million, or whatever. But I'm going to start them both at 0. And then I'm going to say something like console dot write line, please enter a number. You know what? I'm going to change that. Please enter the first number. And then I'm going to say num1. Notice how it's still trying. It understands that I want to use num1, so it's trying to... I apologize for that. My phone went off. So anyway, okay. Where was I? Oh yeah, num1. And then I'm going to tell it equals... And I'm going to say convert dot. Now convert, just like console, convert is a command. And when I put the dot, here's the commands that go with it. And I want to find the to int. And I'm going to go ahead and make it int 32. Point to that. To int 32. And I'll explain that in just a second. And then console dot readline. Now, what did that do? Whenever you type something in, the computer does not automatically know that it's a number. Just because you enter the number 5, if I said please enter the first number and you put a 5, the computer doesn't know that it's the number 5. It accepts everything as a character or as a string. So if I put 5-2, it would accept it as the character 5 and not the number 5. I know that can be a little confusing, but it has to do with how ASCII converts things. So anyway, for now, just trust me on this. We're going to say convert to an integer whatever they enter and assign it to num1. Then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say console dot writeline, please enter the second number, semicolon, and I'm going to say num2 equals convert dot, and now it's picking 2 at 32 because that's what I did last time. So it assumes I want to do the same because I do. I'm doing the same thing, so console dot readline and a semicolon. Now, I messed up here. I have to go back. At the end, I have to add an open and close parenthesis. And I have to do the same thing at the end of this line, because these are actual functions, and we'll get to what a function is later. A function is just a chunk of code, but this is a command, and you have to have those at the end. So, for now, I'm almost done. Now I'm going to come up, and I'm going to say, you know what? I need another number. Let's call it total. int total equals 0. And I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to say total equals num1 plus num2. That's pretty simple, right? What I'm telling it now is whatever I entered for num1, say I entered 5, and whatever I entered for num2, let's say I entered 2, add them together, and it'll be the value of total. So that would be 7. Then I'm going to say console dot writeline, and in the parentheses, I'm just going to put, for now, total. All I'm telling it now is that it will output the value. So let's run it and see. I'll show you better in a minute. And here we go. Please enter the first number. Okay, let's do 5. And then I got to hit the enter key. Please enter the second number. I'll do 2. And hit the enter key. And it just came up and said 7. So that's exactly right. Now, that's not very readable for the user. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say quote, the value of num1 plus num2 equals, and then I'm going to put a comma. Now, here's something very important. If I had left the word total inside the quotes, it would have literally output the word total. But because I put a comma and then I put the total here, it's going to output the value of total, which in the last example was 7. So let's save it and run it. Please enter the first number. Okay, 3. Please enter the second number, 7. The value of num1 plus num2 is, and it did not do it. I messed up. Why did I mess up? That happens sometimes. In the programming world, there's an old saying that says, writing a program is 10% writing the code and 90% fixing whatever you did. So, here's what I did wrong. I forgot that I need to add a brace and the number 0 here. Now what that does is, it tells it that this will be the first thing displayed here, or I'm sorry, the value here will be displayed in place of this. So let's run it now and see, and then I'll explain that a little better. So let's say 6 and I don't know, 12. The value of num1 plus num2 is 18. Now that's a little more useful. But let's say I want to make it even more useful. Instead of outputting actually num1 and num2, I want to output whatever the value is. So, let's change that up just a little bit. Instead of num1 and num2, I'm going to put an open and a 0 and a close brace, a plus sign. I'm going to do the same thing for 1, an equal sign. I'm going to do the same thing for 2. Now, the very first variable after this comma is going to be assigned here. So if I just ran it like this, it would assign whatever the answer is to this first one, but that's not what I want. I want num1 to display there, comma, I want num2 to be in the second one, and then the total. So as I run this now, this 0 in the braces is going to be replaced by the value of num1. This 1 will be replaced by num2, and this 2 will be replaced by this because it's the third one. No matter what I type, this should always be accurate. So let's enter the first number. Okay, 4. Enter the second number, 8. The value of 4 plus 8 equals 12. It's like magic, only without the magic. Okay, let me show you one other thing real quick that I could have done. Console, a moment ago, I had the value is, and then I put comma total, and nothing showed up after when I ran it. But here's why. If I'm not using these brackets with the numbers like this, what I would have to do is combine my strings with a plus sign. So what this would do is it would now output the value is and the total. Let's try it. Oh, I had a build error. That happens. No, I didn't want to run it. I want to figure out what my error was. Oh, I forgot the semicolon. That happens too. Okay, now let's save it and run it. Enter the first number, 3. Enter the second number, 5. And the other lines are still up, so it said the value of 3 plus 5 equals 8. And then here it says the value is 8. Okay, so what else can we do with that? Why did I mention that? Let's go ahead and comment these 2 lines out for now. So when I run it, actually, not this line, just this line. So when I run it, Now it would just give me, if I do 3 and 8 again, it would just give me the value is 11. Notice there's no space between is and 11. Why? Because I didn't tell it to you. The next thing literally came at the end of this one. So I would put a space there. But here's why this is important. Because if I wanted to do it this way, notice in this line up here, I had the value of, and I had the first variable that would display, and then I had more that I could output. I could have had words just like I have the equal sign and the plus sign. If I'm doing it this way, then I would need another plus sign and a quote. The value is total if you wanted to know. Why not? And then when I run it, 2, 3, it says the value is 5 if you wanted to know. I did this just to show you that there's several different ways you can do this. I could have taken the same approach here simply by, instead of putting pluses, I could have had all this as one line. Let me show you. I'm going to copy this line and I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to take out a lot of this. And I'm going to put one of those, comma, total. These would do the exact same thing, these two lines. So let's run it and see, because this is important that you understand. You always have to know there's more than one way that you can do something. Notice these two lines came out exactly the same. The value of 5 is, or the value is 5 if you wanted to know. I just wanted to show you that you can do these more than one way. In the programming world, there's often going to be several different ways that you can do things, and it'll be up to you to figure out which way is right. And which way is right often just depends on you, which way you can make work. Okay, I have one more thing I want to show you real quick. And let's get rid of both of these lines. In fact, I'm going to get rid of a lot of these lines. I don't need any of these for what I'm going to show you next. Next, we're going to deal with strings. So, string, let's call it test string. Why not? And as you remember, a string is simply a series of characters. So it could be somebody's first name or somebody's whole name. It could be an address. It could be the letter A. It could be any of that. So let's try console.writeLine enter a string, and then let's do test string equals console.readLine. Notice a couple of things here. First, I did not have to put a convert. Remember before we did to convert to int for the integers? We don't have to do that now, because it's already accepting it as a string, which is what we want. Console.writeLine. And let me mention this real quick. What's the difference between a write and a WriteLine statement? A write statement would output the word. So here, if I would have done write instead of WriteLine, it would have outputted enter string, the exact same that it did, only instead of returning to the next line and waiting for you to type, it would have stayed at the end of that line. That's all the WriteLine statement. That's the only difference between a write and a WriteLine, is that WriteLine's like hitting enter after you type it. So you entered, let's do a 0. Now because it's a string, I'm going to put quotes there, and you'll see why in a second, comma, and I forgot to put the quotes at the beginning. Okay. With my semicolon. So, I'll show you in a sec. Let's run it. Please enter a string. Bobby. Why not? You entered Bobby. Those little quotes that I put before and after the brace simply puts the quotes here in the output. So, otherwise it would have just said you entered Bobby without having quotes around the word Bobby. That's the only difference. And that's all there is to strings, guys. We'll get in later where you can go in and manipulate them and pull parts of the strings out and all that kind of stuff. But as far as a basic string, that's all there is to it. And watch this. Please enter a string. I love entering... Well, let's do it wrong. Entering strings. Notice I totally misspelled entering. You entered, I love entering strings. It still misspelled it and put exactly what I put because that's what I told it to do. So it's a lot of fun when you get to playing around with it, which is exactly what you'll have to do in order to get good at it. You have to practice this stuff. So that's all for this segment, and I will see you in the next one.